Hi, guys. Thank you so much for coming. I must admit, this is sort of like a lot where my heart is, so I'm really excited to be speaking here. But I'm just going to jump right in.
No, Nonny?
Mucho gusto,
Nice to meet you. Molt de gust.
Yes. Hello from Los Angeles, California.
Welcome to Barcelona. Benvinguda a Barcelona. I don't know, Nonny, if I could ask you to raise your arms. A veure si pot aixecar els braços. Ja veieu que els aixeca. Keep them up, because now we'll show the robot. I ara anirem a veure el robot, que ja veieu. Can you move them a little bit more? A veure si els pot moure una mica més. Up and down. Doncs ja veieu que el robot reacciona perfectament amb la Nonny. Nonny, I'm ready to interview you now for a few minutes. Li farem una entrevista a la Nonny per veure què li ha semblat aquesta experiència. You're a journalist, ella és una periodista, i fa una estona ha entrevistat un científic de Barcelona. You just interviewed a researcher from Barcelona, but in a body of a robot. What was that experience like?
So for me, it starts to feel very natural after a while. Occasionally, there's some problems with the eye movement in my head if I move too fast. But beyond that, very quickly, I'm there in Barcelona with you.
If you don't mind bringing the lights down just a little bit more, I think it'd be better for people. Thank you. So how did I end up in two places at once? So does anybody in this room remember a rape in cyberspace? So this was a text-based virtual world, right, in the 90s, in which a guy hacked in and started raping the women. And the women were incredibly upset. And it started the first controversy. Well, if it's only a text-based self, why would the women be really upset, right? It turns out it's because our digital sense of presence is really quite powerful. And it only becomes more and more powerful as we move into new technologies. Mel Slater and Maria Sanchez-Vives, some of the best and earliest researchers in VR, call it rare, response as if real. I showed this slide where this guy, those goggles feed into that video camera, so he's seeing his own body from behind. But they brought a hammer down in front of the camera, and he jumped because he felt like he was where the camera was, where he was seeing his world, rather than where he was actually sitting. We're hardwired to adopt representations of ourselves as reals, and you guys probably know that better than anybody. But immersive journalism, which is really what I started calling this a while ago now, it's not really a new idea, because journalists have always tried to carry us to some place, to something to have a deeper understanding of what's going on. Martha Gellhorn was a reporter in World War II, and she called it A View from the Ground. And Walter Cronkite, one of America's greatest journalists, had a series of films he called You Are There. And here's a clip from one of them.
The Mexican province of Texas is not a part of the United States, although it has been populated by a steady stream of Americans. These Texians, as they are called, are Mexican citizens. Their province is part of the Mexican nation, but their difficulties with the central government have steadily increased. Now there is open rebellion.
March 5th, 1836. The Siege of the Alamo. You are there.
So he just commanded you to be there. If you know that, now you know where that voice came from, right? Some of you might also know some of these documentary games. How many of you played JFK Reloaded, where you just played the shooter to see if you could, make the shot from the book depository? Right? That's how we try to deal with the controversy. Couldn't be done, right? What are the conspiracy theories really about? Or some of you might know the Kuma Wars work and the John Kerry Swift boat, which was during the first Bush presidential campaign, and they argued that John Kerry didn't necessarily deserve his medal in Vietnam, so you got to play John Kerry to see if you could actually win the medal. And one of the most controversial was 9/11 Survivor, in which you just played a victim. One of the makers of this game, John Brennan, told me that he was gaming, and he was in San Diego, and it was 3 in the morning, and he had his TV on, and he looked on his TV and suddenly saw people jumping from the World Trade Center. And this game was made to kind of try to deal with that story and what was going on. And another of the developers said, the game itself is not really a game at all. It keeps no score or actual track of time. It's merely a moment caught in time. And I think that's what we're always trying to do with journalism. So I brought these ideas to USC, to the journalism school, where I was working as a research fellow. And they were working on what I would consider a traditional journalism site. It was, video, text, audio, called Hunger in the Golden State. And it was looking at like food banks, which were overwhelmed, right? And I was like, hey, I'd like to do a VR piece. And they were kind of like, yeah, whatever, you're probably, completely out of your mind. But I had a great intern, and the two of us started going out to food banks, recording audio. And then she came back to my office in tears, because in this long line, one of the guys waiting had diabetes, and he didn't get food in time, and his blood sugar dropped too low, and he collapsed into a diabetic coma. So with $700 of my own money and lots of favors, we recreated the scene in Unity.
People, there's too many people. Somebody
Okay, he's having a seizure.
You can sort of see the Photoshop sidewalk. It's got the real stains from the real street. And these are the goggles, right, that we're using. And you can see for this guy, we're in the lab at USC. If you could turn the audio down for 1 second, please. You can see for this guy, the scene seems, real. He's careful not to step on the seizure victim at his feet. He's looking down. For him, even with that big cable and that huge cord, he's in the room. He's in the room while that's happening. So that project got into Sundance in January 2012, and it got in the fall. But the only goggles we had were called the Wide 5, and they're this $50,000 pair of goggles, right? And the head of the lab, Mark Bolus, was like, you ain't taking those anywhere. So fortunately, there's some pretty smart people working there, all trying to create goggles, and some of you might take a look at the guy who's got his face hidden. We'll talk about that in a minute. But we were pushed really hard to get 2 pairs of goggles that we could take to Sundance. So we showed up with this lovely duct tape pair, right? And we have no idea how people are going to react. But then this is opening night. Could you turn the audio back up, please? So what'd you think? Oh, you're crying. You're crying. Gina, you're crying. So you can hear the surprise in my voice, right? Well, this happened over and over and over again. And if you take another look at those goggles, it says PR4 HMD, and underneath it's signed Palmer Luckey, who 9 months later, at that time he crashed in my hotel room, driving the truck back for us. 9 months later, does a Kickstarter for the Oculus, and then, of course, now he's on Time Magazine after selling his company for $2 billion to Facebook, and gives us the greatest memed Time Magazine cover, right? But also, they were always working on these fold-up viewers at the same time for your mobile phone. And this is me just like beady-eyed trying to prove to the world that this was a viable way to do VR. And this was at the Google campus with a joint event with journalists run by the Center for Investigative Reporting. And I was handing these out to anybody who would take them. And then this fall, we got the Google Cardboard going out with the New York Times, right? So amazing. In like less than 4 years, what the hell happened? And just to point out one more time, this really was all happening because I wanted to do a piece about hunger. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the difference between how we use walk-around VR, volumetric VR, to do stories. So this was before we even had, this was still with the Wide 5, this was in early days. This was in a lab in Barcelona. And I was trying to take a lot of work I had done on Guantanamo Bay prison, and we had this audio, this information about detainees being put in a stress position, and what did that really mean for hours? So we created this crazy piece where we put you in a body of a detainee in a stress position, right? And people were actually hearing the audio of an interrogation coming through, very, very muffled through the walls, right? And you can keep the audio up. And they'd look down, and they would like see this virtual knee. They were wearing a breathing strap, right? So that the picture they saw in the mirror was actually breathing at the same time as they were. Oops, sorry, and I was finishing the story up. But what we found was that even though people were sitting upright in their chair, and we asked them afterwards, what was your body like? And repeatedly, they claimed that they were hunched over in a stress position like what they saw in the mirror, right? So this gives you an idea of just the power of being embodied in the space. Well, we don't have to use those goggles anymore, right? Everybody's coming out with goggles for walking around, which are amazing and exciting. So more recently, I did a piece about this guy, Anastasio Hernandez Rojas, who was brought to this country as a young boy from Mexico. And he, on Mother's Day, during the downturn, he had no papers, so he was working construction, but he stole a bottle of tequila and a steak for his wife. And he was caught, arrested, deported, and he tried to sneak back into the country very quickly. And instead of helping him out or whatever, the officer arrested him, basically beat him up. And he then complained to the supervisor, and rather than doing anything about it, the supervisor sent him this dark pen where some pretty awful stuff happened. Could you turn the audio up, please? So we took this to BuzzFeed, and this is their experience of it.
I don't even know what these are. I guess cameras?
Looks like somebody's going to shock me.
That guy's holding a lightsaber back there.
I think virtual reality really is like the next big thing. I think it's the new video game or whatever that means.
It's so weird. There's like all these people and I'm like, what is about to happen?
How's this look with my hair? Pretty good, right?
Oh, got it. Right. Whoa!
This is going to simulate a cell phone, so it's going to be when you press this button here, and you hold it up in front of you, a cell phone will appear, and you'll have 60 seconds to record whatever you want before your battery dies.
Oh, I see. Oh my God. That's even crazier.
All right, so there's a bunch of cops here. They're like standing around, something's going on.
Oh, right here. That's not cool.
Like on the other side of a fence, there's all these people just like kicking and beating this man, and he's screaming.
So give the graphics, we had about 40K to build this piece.
Look at this, and nobody's doing anything about it. Of course nobody's doing anything about it, right? Of course, because that's what people do, they just watch. It's kind of messed up.
Oh, here we go.
I couldn't tell before, but I think he's handcuffed.
I'm looking above. I'm seeing the horror.
Hey, we're recording you!
Already not moving, but there's like 5 dudes beating him.
Same thing, they just are not stopping. I don't know. I mean, I can't believe that like is real.
Did not expect a recreation of a real life beating.
I thought it was going to be some sort of possibly some entertaining game. That was not the case.
You feel kind of like helpless and isolated.
Hopefully in that situation you actually would be able to like somehow stop it, but I do think like the next best thing is recording it.
I wonder what I would really do. Like, I know you want to say stuff, it's okay to say stuff, but it's like I don't have the power to go and arrest the police. Maybe that's problematic.
I think when you see something like that, you're like, wow, that was horrible, but at least like the one comfort that I have is like the United States justice system will do something about it, and like people that do bad things get punished for that. And then like what we've been seeing the past few weeks is like sometimes that doesn't happen.
The thing that was really sort of disorienting is that it wasn't one cop doing it and his partner, it was all these other cops sort of standing around and watching.
I think every police officer in the United States probably needs to experience what I just experienced.
I think everyone should give this a shot.
And it should not only be for entertainment. I think there should be a whole universe of stuff that we can use this for. And this is definitely something I didn't consider at all. And it's really effective.
So Anastasia Rojas died that night, and yet it was barely covered by the press. This is actually now an older slide, but yet here's a case that barely got attention by the press, and yet we've got hundreds and hundreds of thousands of views and comments about race in America based on a BuzzFeed video of the VR piece. And a little bit about how I made that and why I was able to make what I was able to make. This was a couple of cell phone videos were captured, 2 of them. It included this young woman. Well, the Border Patrol was going around taking people's phones off them and cameras off them. And she snuck hers out and was able to show how many officers were involved in the actual beating and tasering to death of this man. So we brought her to the lab and we scanned her. And we put her in herself so that when you're standing up on the ledge, seeing this, you're standing next to her. And rather than having me sit her down in a chair and interview her, I had to put on a mocap suit and facial captured her, and I had to recreate her own memory of the night. So we had the tape as a kind of guide, but she tried to shout the same things and move her body in the same way so that it became a story through her body as much as through her interview. And again, this was at Tribeca Film Festival, and as you can see, brightly lit room, but everybody's trying to see over that ledge. This is an embodied medium, and it's pretty amazing that you can get people to feel like they're standing there in this real event. Those are our old goggles. So after I made Hunger, I was commissioned to make a piece about Syria, which is unfortunately way worse than I ever imagined when I made this in 2013. And here's just a quick trailer on it. So that went to the World Economic Forum, where everybody from Peter Gabriel to John McCain actually saw the piece, and of course the Syrian contingent. But even more interesting is it went to the Victoria and Albert Museum in London, and they didn't advertise it. They just let us put up our crazy-ass stuff in the tapestry room, sort of, old tech, old kind of storytelling tapestries, and our tech facing off after each other. But anybody who did the experience had me just walking by. So they're from all over the world, this renowned museum. They were all age groups. And they would see this crazy contraption and agree to do it, right? And the reactions were astonishing. At the end of it, we were told we had the largest outpouring of guest book comments that the museum had seen, including comments like, completely immersed, quite frightening, absolutely believable, even with our low-quality graphics, right? So, and the best one, absolutely fascinating, a real feeling as if you're in the middle of something that you would normally see on TV news. And that has been my goal. We've had a little bit of fun making these pieces as well. We were commissioned by Standard Chartered to do a Formula One piece. And this first put you in the pit crew, so you're with the pit while they're doing this tire change, right?
Whoa. This is so cool.
Yeah, so cool, right? Right? And what we did then is we also put you in a car, and we put the hydraulic car and the gaming thing, so after you did the pit crew, you had to drive the car of the real Singapore race. And the hydraulics and the VR were matched up. And we also gave people an app that they could see what place they were in, and people kept running back trying to compete with their friends. In any case, it was super fun, too. So it's fun to do fun news pieces, not just tragic ones, although we do a lot of social impact work. And the one thing about VR, right, that makes it so powerful is it is this undivided attention that creates this emotional connection. People aren't looking at their phones. They're deeply engaged. And we've also tried to do some very fast turnaround pieces. We made the Trayvon Martin case, which we were able to get the drawings for the apartment complex right off the web. We were able to get images from real estate sites right off the web. We were able to buy George Zimmerman's car from TurboSquid. And we were able to pull together with one person and another person part-time in less than a week and a half a VR piece to kind of give you a sense of what it was like to be there. I think you can turn the audio back up, please. Using the 911 calls and nothing else. We did not make anything up that wasn't well documented.
Now he's just staring at me. Shit, he's running. He's running. Which way is he running? Down towards the entrance of the neighborhood. Okay. What entrance is
So for some of you who don't know the Trayvon Martin case, that was a neighborhood vigilante who gave pursuit to this young man who'd moved in with his dad and actually ended up shooting and killing him. And the forensic audio specialist who cleaned up the audio for our VR piece told us that he would testify that George Zimmerman, the vigilante, cocked his gun when he got out of the car. So that's breaking news with VR. Super interesting idea that we could break news with something that's completely CG related. Kia, just to give you an idea of some of our work that we do, this was a domestic violence piece where two sisters both called 911 on their phone to try to rescue a third sister from a fatal attack by an ex-boyfriend. So we used FOIA information to try to model all the experience one-to-one, and interviews and other things to put you on scene for a project that describes very clearly how 3 women a day are killed by their intimate partners in the United States. Anyway, that's Kia, which we have going around now. Very quickly, I also want to touch on spherical video, cinematic VR, which is another place that people are doing a lot of work right now. And we've done a little bit of work. That's where you get your cardboard or your Gear VR, and you have all these crazy types of cameras trying to capture a world in a 360 way. And it can be very beautiful. This is a piece we did at the BBC of the Calais migrant camps. But of course, if you don't know about the problems, just gives you a quick idea. You see that guy in the bottom right, that's my cameraman trying to hide himself with a blue shirt and sunglasses. So, you've got issues of where do you put the photographer? How do they run and hide? What do you do in a big life situation? And this is a similar, very simple GIF. If you see the two girls in the black dresses, one of them will disappear in the middle of this, and that's what they call the stitching issue, right? So then you have to go in and composite in the individual to cover up those kind of errors. So you're back using CG stuff to deal with some of the problems. But I would say to you that these two forms will merge. They're already merging. There's Project Tango. There's lots of people starting to do photogrammetry to capture humans. Qualcomm and Intel, they're both releasing their phones with chips that would allow you to scan anything. So you'll be able to literally scan where you are, whoever you want to, and pop it into any kind of game engine. You know, they're not perfect, but boy, are they fast. Sorry, this is, am I behind one slide? Sorry, that's the one I wanted to have up. Did I skip this? No, I didn't. Okay, sorry. So this is a photogrammetry image, and then this is an idea of Project Tango, which lets you do the VR, the AR, and sort of stuff. This is a human engine model of a photogrammetry that we've used before, and we use these models for, but in order to animate them, right, because they're frozen, we did a piece recently with Planned Parenthood about the experience of young women trying to get health services. And the way that we had to deal with that, we took real audio from around the country, but then what I had to do was actually, if you can turn the volume up, please, recreate what happened.
You're a whore! You're a whore! You're a whore! You're a little whore! How about stop being a whore? You whore! Shame on you! Start closing your legs! Start having some respect for your body! Maybe your parents should have aborted you!
So using that kind of audio, we then put it on top of the characters, and that's how we get some of our pieces. But again, as things will merge, there's cameras that are trying to shoot out videogrammetry. And to me, maybe familiar with Corporate Real, they're also doing videogrammetry, which means not just photogrammetry of capturing the models, but actually capturing movements. And the company that I'm partnering with right now, 8i, which is going to let me do a really interesting experiment with an LGBTQ project I'm doing right now, where 80% of homeless youth in the United States are from LGBTQ communities, have been thrown out by their families, and we're telling the story of one guy and then bringing him in at the end to do a videogrammetry finish to bring some hope to the projects. I think this gives you a pretty good overview about the work I do, how I do it, and why I think virtual reality works so well. And I would love to turn the lights and open up for just a few minutes of questions. I don't know if we've got a microphone or... Do we have a mic out there for questions, or anybody with questions? Here we go. Up here, on the coming up, there we go.
Hi, can you hear me? Okay, cool. My name's Jason. I'm the editor of SF Tech Beat. So I'm asking you from the journalistic perspective. I feel like when you use VR, it isn't like a picture or a sound. It's something that you're creating with your own bias. So therefore, some of the information that you present as facts aren't literally facts. It's something that you believe that happened. You're presenting that as truth. How is that okay?
So, you know, I come from a strong journalistic background. I was a correspondent for Newsweek. I've worked for the New York Times, LA Times. So I do try very hard to stick with journalistic principles when we create these things, but not to be too snarky about it or whatever. But here's the deal. Since I've started doing this and have achieved a certain amount of notoriety, I've been interviewed many, many times, and I can tell you there are errors in every single piece that interviews me. And so the idea that text-based can be more true maybe have its own fallacies. So what I suggest is we do transparency. So if I'm able to put up in all my pieces, where did I get the information? How did I get the information? Here are documents you can look at yourself, or you can make your own decisions. I think that's the best approach I can do until we have videogrammetry that can capture events as they transpire.
Okay, thank you.
Hi.
Go ahead, please. Oh, over there. Sorry.
Oh, I thought we. Okay. Yeah. Hi. I just want to know what your experiences were like working with Lytro.
So I haven't worked with the Lytro yet. Me too. Will somebody tell Lytro I want to work with them? Okay. I haven't. I've only worked with 8i, who I just love. Those guys. They've been great.
Thanks.
Hi. I'm Lucy. I'm from NYU. I'm doing a documentary on the lack of mental health care for the homeless in New York, and how how would you do kind of an immersive experience if you wanted to live the life of somebody who was kicked out of a homeless shelter? Would you just how would you kind of formulate that, I guess.
So it depends on what you're going to do. Like a lot of the pieces I've been doing have been have linear narrative to them, but I make them spatial narrative. So we put you on scene while the events happen, but there isn't necessarily branching elements. If any of you know Serial, I use that as a great example as the first podcast, which is a murder, basically a murder mystery, essentially, and there's a lot of spaces where things might have happened. It seems to me that it's perfect for agency, meaning letting the audience speed up time or choose where they're going to look at next or call up documents without necessarily disturbing the linear nature of the story or the event or the linear nature of what happened to the degree which the journalist knows. So I think there's a lot of room for agency, but that's going to require some game mechanics that I would love to see people starting to apply to this medium. You have to decide, are you going to take a spatial story that's going to linear and unfold, or are you going to try to give people some sense of all the different variables that go into homelessness, in which case you might think about more game mechanics and branching narrative to your approach.
Okay, thanks.
I am in charge of a school of games in France.
Could you speak a little louder, please?
Yes, I am in charge of a school of games in France, and I have students who made the games where you live the 10 last minutes in the Twin Towers before it falls. They had a big success. All the press in France came to see that because they thought it was the future of journalism. I am really, to come back to a question, really in trouble about that, because in your talk, you talk about emotion. Do you think that journalism is about emotion or rational relation to events? And in another way, I'm not against political games. I'm pushing my students to make political games, but political games is not journalism. It's an engagement. If you look to Gonzalo Frasca works, you have something which pushes you in a certain way. And I am really afraid in the confusion of La Société du Spectacle, a society of spectacle of Guy Debord is coming into virtual reality.
So I think, again, we're back to like what is a political game versus a journalistic game. So some of you might have known the redistricting game that came out of USC. And redistricting as an issue, at one point the Texas Democrats refused, they all fled for New Mexico so they didn't have to vote on a redistricting bill that was going to take away Democratic seats. So that was the story, right? That's the journalism piece. But what was this story, and how do we understand it a lot better? Well, people will put up charts or infographics or whatever, and USC instead decided to make a game where you had to figure out how to make fair districts. And I think that the two go hand in hand. Instead of an infographic, you might have a political game, but I don't think that a political game, it could have a lot more depth in the way that we might do an investigative piece. So I'm not sure that you wouldn't rely on good journalism to create a political game. So I hope that was a roundabout way of saying I do see a political game can be journalism. How am I doing? One more question?
One more question. We have about 20 minutes before the next session turns around, so if there are any more questions after this, we have a room in 2022 where we can keep asking questions
okay,
after
so you're that 2022. I'll head over there. Go ahead.
Thanks. I just wanted to get your thoughts on what drew you to these topics, and do you have any strategies for coping with dealing with stories like these? Because I imagine it's pretty taxing and emotional.
So the only reason why I can think about why I've been drawn to these stories, because people ask me that question, I'm not really sure, other than my mom used to tell me stories being, Mexican-American in Texas, and things like going to a coffee shop with their friends, and they'd be like, oh, we'd like to order, and they would say oh, we'll be right there, oh, we'll be right there, and they would never take their order because they were Mexican-American and they weren't allowed to be in the coffee shop, basically, or whatever, right? They're prejudiced against it. She'd tell me all kinds of terrible stories. I mean, and she's this tiny, cute, little 5-foot, sweetest person on the planet, and she just couldn't get breakfast with her friends. So maybe that's what motivates me, that sense of I need to fight for my mom. I don't know, but I'm always doing underdog stories. Okay, I guess that's it. Thank you guys for coming. See you at 22.